So today we are going to take on a project that we should have done a while ago, but I hurt myself, so I couldn't do anything really with both hands. Today we're going to actually add a lighting kit to the Jeep because the wireless lights that we had attached to the back of it just really weren't cutting it. They do okay for turn signals and stoplights and all that, but once it gets dark, you can't see the Jeep in the camera, so that really just doesn't work for me. I'd like to be able to see the Jeep in the camera while we're driving down the road so that I can make sure that it's still there and all that good stuff. So just having the lights on the back on the bike rack works good for the traffic, kind of, because it still leaves a big gap between the trailer and the Jeep, but it doesn't work good for the driver trying to keep track of the Jeep at all. So today we're going to go ahead and install the CoolTech wiring harness, and then I'm going to install some wired lights on the back of the bike rack, because the other problem with the wireless lights is they eat batteries like crazy. So let's go ahead and look at what we got. We've got the wiring harness. This is going to run from the inside of the Jeep through a drain plug out to the front where I'm going to mount the connector there. Got to find a place to mount the connector, but they do give a mounting bracket so I don't have to drill a hole in the bumper. So I got to mount that up there so I can run the cable between the RV and the Jeep. And then we got a new drain plug with a hole in it to run the wire through, and a little bracket to put a switch inside the Jeep to switch it from the Jeep's control of the lights to the tow vehicle's control of the lights. So that's what we have going on here. We got to cut the wiring harness of the Jeep a little bit. You can see that it comes prepared with the switch already wired, and then you can see that it's got all the heat shrink splices or butt connectors on there as well, and then the ground connector. I didn't order it with the power wire because I don't plan on running a power wire to it, because I have a surge brake vice and electric brake, so I don't think I'm going to need power. If I do need it, I can go ahead and do that. And then at some point I've got this little nifty fuse and wiring adapter to make my auxiliary ports inside powered all the time, vice just when the Jeep is powered on. I can't stand that, because like if you want to leave something charging while the Jeep is turned off, you can't do that anymore on these new Jeeps. So this power port will allow me to do that. I'm not sure if I'll get to that today or not. We'll see. So the first part of the installation is actually dismantling the Jeep a little bit. We had to take this off, and it was just a matter of pulling it straight back. And then I pulled this out of this part of it, this retainer, out of the firewall, because I didn't want it hanging in the way. I can push it back in there. And then we had to disconnect the wiring right here, which is just flipping the red tab and then swiveling this up, which disconnects the wires here so you can get them out of the way. And then you pull the nylon off the hook there. So that's all out of the way. And then now I've just got to pull up this right here and pry that out. And I think there's 6 tabs in there, so I'm going to grab a straight screwdriver so I can go and pry it out without breaking it. Almost forgot, there is a nut that you have to remove right there. It's sitting down there in the tray, and the rest of it you just got to push towards the center of the vehicle. This tab right here, there's a tab that goes right there. That one required a little bit of finagling. I had to use a screwdriver to push that one down to get it out, but you can see the tabs are all underneath there, and they don't go up, they go horizontally towards the center of the vehicle. And the only one that I had problems with was this front one right here. You can see the skid plate right there, it's kind of equal to that. That's where I had to use a screwdriver to pry it out. The rest came out pretty easily. And then you just set that aside, and now we've got, you can see down there, if you look real close, there's a 10mm and a 10mm there that you've got to remove, and there might be one more, I can't remember. And then you just pull this up. So that's what I'm going to do next. Is a third 10mm hiding. You can see it. Got it right down there. But you just push this B-pillar plastic out of the way, and then go ahead and pull that 10mm out, which is what I'm going to do now. So on 2022, they've changed the design from the directions that came with the kit. There's actually little tabs right here, and the tabs that insert into side of the door, that you could just pop this off without having to pull this whole thing off. So you could leave the screws or the nuts in place there, 1, 2, and then the third one that's back there in the kind of hidden, and just pop that out instead, and that gives you access to the wiring right here, where we can now strip this back and go ahead and splice the right wires in once we get the switch mounted. So you've got 2 drains. You've got this one, which is blocked by the floor mat and sees a lot of traffic. I don't recommend using this one, but it is available to use if you want. And then you've got the under seat one, which is up there. Kind of hard to see, but it's right up there where that wire goes through. And that's the one I used. And it drops right down on top of the frame, so it helps to kind of bend the wire into a curve and make that curve towards you on the outside of the vehicle, and then it'll push over the frame. And you can see down here, it just like wraps around the frame, and then I'm going to route this to the front using zip ties and keep it out of the way. Probably keep it right on the body or underneath the frame rail, but that'll be the last step after I get this inside stuff done. But it just drops down there, and the hole that's in that bracket that you can't see there, or that drain plug that's up under there, is pretty tight. I don't think any water's coming in, but if you want to silicone it, you can silicone it as well. Then you have to remove the bolt from the seat there. I'm gonna put the bracket, I already did that. I'm gonna put the bracket in there, tighten it back up, and then we're gonna proceed with the wiring. So now you can see seat's bolted back in, the bracket's in there, and I went ahead and tightened down the nut on the switch. So we got tow, Jeep, and now it's time to strip back some of this sheathing, find the right wires, and go ahead and splice into them. The directions are going to show you either with or without the tow package. I've got a tow package, so I've got to remove fuse 109, which is this yellow one right here, and fuse 107, which is this yellow one here. He's got a pretty good diagram in the directions, but I always like to look at the actual diagram, because year over year, even mid-year, or options, they can change stuff on you. So I always look at your actual diagram here that's in the top of the fuse cover and identify it, and it is 107 and 109. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those fuses out, and that's to keep you from misidentifying the right wires. You'll actually have the chance of identifying the wires that go to the trailer vice the actual Jeep wires. The next step is to take this ground wire and route it all the way up to one of these grounding studs up here. And as instructed in the directions, and good practice, use a stud that's already got grounds on it, because that means you've got a good solid ground. And then go ahead and tighten that down. You can see I got that nut loose right now, but you can tighten that down. I've cut back some of the sheathing that's around these wires, and you can see there's a ton of these little bitty tiny wires, so be very careful when cutting back that sheathing that you don't cut into one of those wires, because it'd be really easy to cut one of them in half with no issue whatsoever. I've got a test lamp. Good practice when you're dealing with a test lamp, test it on the battery, and then check your ground and make sure you've got a good connection here. And that big red wire that's going through there is a power wire, so I'm going to try to get right in the same hole I already did. But you're just going to stick your test lamp in there, and you should see the light come on to make sure it's all working. Do that before you start chasing things down. Make sure your wires or your test light actually works before you start delving into chasing down your wires. So now we've got to identify a green, a yellow, a white with orange stripe, and a white with gray stripe wire in there that control the turn signals, brakes, and parking lights. All right, so we have tracked down the wires. We verified that we had the right wires with the test light, and then one by one, just like the instructions say, we started out with the right turn signal, the left turn signal, and I really should have wrapped this around on top of the wire loom. I kind of left it in a not a great spot. It still works and it's fine and it'll bundle up just fine, but it would have been neater if I would have put it on top. But oh well. So that's the left turn signal and then the driving or parking lights right there. And I did one by one, cut the wire, verified that it didn't work, spliced the wire, verified that it did work, all that good stuff. So the next step that I'm going to do is to heat shrink it. Before I do that, real quick, if you don't have one of these for your crimps and your butt splices, this is a really good tool to get. It's like $15 on Amazon. It's Chinese. You can go to Lowe's or Home Depot and buy the equivalent and spend a little bit more money, but it keeps from mangling your splices and it makes a good solid connection. That's what I use. And then of course we've got big wire cutters if we need them, and then I've got somewhere around here my baby wire cutters, which I must have misplaced somewhere. And then we've got, I like this for stripping wires because it does a really good job, much better than what you see at the automotive store. This is just a Lowe's purchase. And then here you go, there's my baby wire cutters that I heat shrink the handles just to make sure you don't get shocked if you're doing something with voltage. But those are the tools you need. And I went ahead and pulled all my little electrical tape markers off of it. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to heat shrink these, and then I'm going to wire tie or zip tie them in place, and then I'm going to go ahead and rewrap this with electrical tape so that it is all nice and sealed up and not a tangled mess. So this heat gun is a Harbor Freight special, and it has done all kinds of work for me, from heat shrink to thawing pipes to you name it, whatever you need heat for, removing adhesive. It's been pretty good. It's lasted a good 3 years, 4 years probably. It's still going strong. So what we're going to do is we're going to melt this heat shrink. Kind of move the heat gun around a little bit. Make sure you don't melt the wires or anything. Don't get too close. What this does is it waterproofs that connector and also provides a little bit of strain relief on it. And you'll see those ends close up. And there should be some glue inside these as well that helps provide some strain relief. And this is one of the reasons why you use a little bit higher quality crimper on these, is because it doesn't mangle the plastic or the heat shrink, so that you don't have metal exposed there. I'm going to go ahead and cover this up with electrical tape anyways, but just in case, you want to make sure that you don't have any exposed metal. These newer vehicles are really finicky about their electrical bus, so you try not to screw it up. Whenever I cut into wires and I splice them and I add stuff like we just did here, I like to zip tie at the connections so that there's not a chance of them pulling loose. So I throw some zip ties on here before I go ahead and run electrical tape down the run and seal up where we kind of remove this friction tape there. But I just like to zip tie it so that, just in case, just so there's not anything chancing moving around there. Next thing I'm going to do is just take that electrical tape right there and run that down and cover up our gap there that we created. So now we've got it all back together most of the way. It's just time to put the trim in, but we've got that taped up. The wires are zip tied right there, and then they run under the seat into the switch. So it's just a matter of putting the trim back together and then running the portion of the wire underneath the car. Just snaps back in, and now it's just time to pull these trim pieces back together. where they belong. This might take a little finagling because of that door hinge piece right there, but other than that, it's just a matter of snapping things back together. So we have the switch there, the little tow and Jeep switch. We've got our trim back in place, You gotta remember to hook that up and connect the wires. And then that drain plug is actually part of the floor mat that I've got out, so that'll go back in when I put the floor mat in. Now it's time to route the wire to the front. So we've got the wire routed up to where I'm putting the plug at, and it's all done. Obviously there's a little bit more routing to do here because this is loose and the heat shrink's not on there yet, but I've got to test the lights to make sure that they're wired correctly. And then we should be ready to tow this thing. The other thing I did was I did put that power modification in there. All it was connecting a live battery post to the cigarette lighter. So the cigarette lighter now has power all the time. Good for things like your camera or your phone or something. Here we are doing our test to see if it all works, and I'll show you how we got set up for a test. But basically it's an end-to-end test because I don't trust just testing one thing anymore. I've had too many things to go wrong, and it's a real pain in the ass on the day that you're getting ready to leave to have things go wrong, or to be halfway down the highway and have somebody flag you down, or to have somebody flash their lights at you and you're like, I don't know what the hell's going on. So I just have gotten in the habit that I'm going to do an end-to-end test. So what I'll show you here, you see that we've got the Jeep all hooked up via the umbilical cord to the trailer. And then if we go across here and walk down to the truck, nice tight sights here, you'll see that I went ahead and backed the truck up, hooked the truck up to the trailer, and tested the connection all the way through, and then tested everything. And this is the last of our little lighting upgrade. I put a little piece of angle iron, actually angle aluminum, underneath the bike rack. I screwed it in where it could screw it in, and then I put a couple big zip ties on it just in case. And those lights right there are actually wired lights, and they will plug into the back of the Jeep when we reconfigure for travel, just so that we have a little bit of extra visibility from the back in case those bike racks are blocking the Jeep's lights.